I'm Jordan Dunbar. This is the Mangione Trial podcast from the BBC World Service. Our podcast looks at the unprecedented reaction to the killing of Brian Thompson, who was shot dead in broad daylight in the US city of New York. Luigi Mangione was charged with his murder and his face went viral. In these episodes, we take a step back to unpick the conspiracies, consider the facts, and explain what happens in court. We're working on a new series at the moment, and that will be released later in April, but we said we'd always update you with any significant developments in the case. And there has been a really important development today. US Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced US prosecutors will seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione. With me to find out more is the BBC New York correspondent, Neda Taufik. Neda, can you explain what's actually just happened?
Well, a press release has hit our inboxes from the Department of Justice with an announcement that the U.S. Attorney Pam Bondi has directed federal prosecutors here in New York to seek the death penalty against Luigi Mangione in the federal case. Now, she put out a statement saying that after careful consideration, she came to this decision in order to fill Donald Trump's pledge to stop violent crime and make America safe again. And she outlined the details of the accusations against Luigi Mangione, saying that it was a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination, that it shocked America, and that given that, describing it as an act of political violence as well, that she had decided basically it was warranted the death penalty in this case. And remember, this is a decision that we had been waiting on for some time because the federal charges against him technically do carry the death penalty, but it wasn't for sure that the government was going to seek that. So we now have the confirmation from Pam Bondi that she will do that.
Well, let's just go through this. So when we talk about the federal case, that's the government. So it's the government seeking the death penalty. But that's only one of three cases that we have going on with Luigi Mangione. So can we talk through the other two and where we are with those?
Yeah, so certainly remember he was ultimately arrested in Pennsylvania after a manhunt. So there is a case there. But by far the most serious cases are the two in New York, where he is accused of murdering Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan outside of a hotel. You have the state, New York State. Those prosecutors have a case where they have charged him with murder, other terror charges, so a very significant case. And if he's convicted there, he faces the possibility of life in prison without parole. And because this was, again, in Manhattan, where Brian Thompson was murdered and where Luigi Mangione is accused of shooting him, the state prosecutors have jurisdiction. But what we saw was really the federal government also coming in and saying that they wanted to seek their own charges as well. So you will ultimately have these two trials. We heard from the state that the federal government has allowed their trial to go first. And so all of the kind of court appearances that we've been going to as of late have all been in regards to the state case. But once that is finalized, the federal trial will also then start.
So those are the charges. Neda, what has Luigi Mangione said in each of these cases? Has he put in a plea?
So certainly in the state case, Luigi Mangione has had the chance to tell the judge his plea, and he's pleaded not guilty to those 11 counts he faces, again, the murder and terror charges in the state case. Because these trials are kind of running parallel, but really the state one is going to precede the federal case, we haven't yet had him formally enter a plea when it comes to the federal case. In the federal case, he is facing charges of committing murder using a firearm and interstate stalking. So that is why the federal government here has jurisdiction, because Luigi Mangione kind of fled through different states.
Do we still think that the state trial will be going first? even after this announcement today?
All indications so far are that it will. I don't see how this would necessarily change that. In fact, any motions or court appearances in the federal case have been delayed and delayed again, understanding there's no urgency given the state trial will take some time.
In US Attorney General Pam Bondi's statement, she referenced President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again. What's she referring to?
Yeah, well, let's remember that Luigi Mangione, this entire case, unfolded in December. And Donald Trump had yet to take office. But from his campaigning, we knew that he was going to once again be open to the death penalty. But it became very clear when he came into office, when Pamela Bondi put out basically a memorandum to the Department of Justice. And in it, she kind of described the era of since 2021, when the Biden administration and the Attorney General at the time, Merrick Garland, put a moratorium on the death penalty. She described that as a shameful era. And she said it was a shameful era because the Trump administration feels that the death penalty, when used against the most egregious crimes, that it made Americans undoubtedly, she said, safer, more secure as a result of this critical work. So what you have here is the Trump administration signaling that it is going to lift that moratorium that was in place under the previous administration, that they are going to seek the death penalty again because they believe it helps advance Trump's agenda.
Never have we heard anything from Luigi Mangione's team since this press release has come out.
Yes, we have. His lawyer, Friedman Agnifilo, put out a pretty forceful statement with some strong words. She wrote, "By seeking to murder Luigi Mangione, the Justice Department has moved from the dysfunctional to the barbaric. Their decision to execute Luigi is political and goes against the recommendation of the local federal prosecutors, the law, and historical precedent. While claiming to protect against murder, the federal government moves to commit the premeditated, state-sponsored murder of Luigi. By doing this, they are defending the broken, immoral, and murderous healthcare industry that continues to terrorize the American people. We are prepared to fight these federal charges brought by a lawless Justice Department, as well as the New York State charges and the Pennsylvania charges and anything else they want to pile on Luigi. This is a corrupt web of government dysfunction and one-upmanship. Luigi is caught in a high-stakes game of tug-of-war between state and federal prosecutors, except the trophy is a young man's life." So as you can see there, it's quite a statement and a lot to unpack from it. Remember, this is a statement very much made for public consumption because while many are horrified by the murder of Brian Thompson, others have kind of looked at Luigi Mangione as something of a folk hero because of the healthcare system in America. But if you look at the statement, for one, there's no way to verify if this recommendation by Pam Bondi, the U.S. attorney, really does go against the recommendation of local federal prosecutors. That's certainly a claim that his defense lawyer is putting forward there. Also, she says that this is state-sponsored murder of Luigi Mangione, just to say that the death penalty is not considered murder, though some opponents certainly feel that it is. It is considered lawful killing because it comes after a legal process, a trial, and a conviction by a unanimous jury. So certainly her statement is meant to be a forceful reaction. And she's also using very emotive language to describe the healthcare industry that not everyone would agree with and would think goes too far, calling it murderous, broke, immoral, and suggesting that the government came to this decision to defend the industry.
And what happens next in terms of this announcement?
Well, look, it's going to be a while before the federal trial begins, as we mentioned, but certainly if Luigi Mangione is found guilty in the federal trial, then what would happen next is that the jury, in a separate phase, would consider whether to recommend the death penalty. And just like any other verdict, their decision would have to be unanimous. They would altogether have to unanimously decide that the case does warrant the death penalty. And then the judge would be required to follow that recommendation and sentence Luigi Mangione to death. And Jordan, a lot of people on social media seem to be asking if New York has the death penalty. And the answer to that is no. That's been the case since 2004, actually, when a court of appeals ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional based on how the state laws were written. And that law was never changed because really public attitudes have shifted so much that New York officials never sought to get the death penalty back in the books. I think it is important to note, though, that even though the death penalty wasn't on the table in the New York State case because the death penalty is banned here, if Luigi Mangione is found guilty, if a jury decides that he should receive the death penalty, that's a federal case that really has authority over the state case. And so Luigi Mangione would be sentenced to death, and that would be carried out regardless of the laws in New York State.
Neda Tawfiq from New York, thank you so much for keeping us up to date.
Great as always to speak with you.
That's it from this episode of the Mangione Trial podcast from the BBC World Service. We'll be here if there are any more developments. Otherwise, we'll be back with a new series released later in April. If you've heard of a claim you want us to fact check or a question for us to tackle, email us at themangionetrial@bbc.co.uk. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the World Service YouTube channel so you never miss a thing.